Okay, good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday at 3 o'clock to try and figure out the future of smart buildings. All of our profiles are on mondaylive.org or links to our LinkedIn profiles. Just as a reminder, the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Please do post questions and chats on the Zoom tools, as I see people are already starting to do, which is wonderful, and complete the survey at the end. And also a reminder, this deck is actually on mondaylive.org if you want to see any of the links that's on it. Just as a reminder again, this is February, and our theme for today is the journey from smart to autonomous buildings, and several stops along the way. On that, our agenda today will have our normal chit chat, and then we're going to talk about the role of services and specifically MSPs, managed service providers, in terms of the smart to autonomous journey. And that should be a good discussion. And we are expecting Matt to join us, Matt Schwartz from Altura. And a few slides to get us going. Ken's going to talk about the collaboratory, I have to say that word, and being the change. Jim Butler is talking about cities in trouble. Look forward to chatting about that. John talking about zombie office towers and somebody losing $2 billion in the pandemic year, which is something I'm sure we'll talk about. Roger talking about, this is a report that Memory did. I saw some of this, so I'd love to get your views on that, Roger. And Anna is talking about the Google Digital Building Project, and we'll talk about that as well. So let's get into the conversation. Who wants to start?
I'll take it. Start.
Go.
Okay, good. We're on to our next chapter and starting to look at our March issue. It's becoming obvious to me that we simply have to be the change. I think we all acknowledge that this change is going on, and we are carriers of change, but we really have to be the change, and that's a little bit of head shaking for us all to do. In addition to that, on Saturday morning, no, I guess it was Friday noon, we all got together and we did our collaboratory, our 9th collective community collaboratory, which we normally do at AHR Expo, but of course, because it had been canceled or postponed is a better word, I guess, not going to happen in Chicago, going to happen in Las Vegas. So we went ahead and Control Trends basically hosted us, and we put together the session that we would have normally done in Chicago was online. So it just got, the URL just got sent to me minutes. I just posted it probably 10 or 20 minutes ago. So it's fresh. I've not even seen it all yet. I started looking at it, but didn't have time to finish. Anyway, you get to see some thoughts. We're all surprised that we've been kind of talking around this for 9 years, and it's evolved to, in a lot of ways, it's the evolution a bit of Monday Alive. And the other point I wanted to make up is March is our the acknowledgement of the women in our industry. So if you have any of them working with you and for you, please have them identify themselves, and we want to feature them in our March issue as we did last March. And they are part of the change that is now occurring in the industry.
Wonderful. Thank you. Jim, do you want to expand on the cities? By the way, Matt, I can see you. I'll bring you on in a couple of minutes. So, Jim?
Yeah, I think this is probably familiar to many people already, but the pandemic has forced us to transition the way we work. And the author of this article in the Atlantic magazine believes that because we have discovered that we can work remotely in many cases, that this means that the value of living in or very near a large city is going down, which will not be good in the future for the large cities such as New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Boston. But on the other hand, it will most likely lead to growth in some of the smaller cities.
And John, Betsy, do you want to?
Yeah, just two comments. The headlines may read negative, but the first headline really gets to a topic we brought up a number of times over the last year, which is repurposing, right? And now someone's coming out and saying these office buildings are empty. They're not going to be filled up. Let's start an effort. And of course, that would require, participation by all the constituents, but they should be turned into housing to address the shortages of housing, which might be lessened by what Jim just said if less people want to be there. That's one. And then on the other side, as we look at the business outlook, right, and the positive impacts we've seen about using more advanced technologies in buildings, there's an example of a large property management firm that lost $2 billion. My guess would be they're probably restricting their spending a little bit after that. So? Probably didn't cause it to open the checkbooks and let's go after everything that's been proposed. But anyways, those are just two interesting, I thought, data points around, the real estate industry trying to sort out what comes next, right?
Great. Roger, do you want to give your take on the memory report?
Yeah, sure. I think it touches on what we've been talking about as well, is the fact that when you look at that slide, it's kind of, there's a little bit in there where we were, which was the building energy management bit with the hardware, software, and services. But when you start looking around, lots of the things that are now added, we've gone from 3 to 30 different fields, and a lot of us are engaged in some of those, and startups, Steve with cybersecurity, and I'm doing some stuff on smart lighting, but you go around and it's all kind of linking up, and it's that thing we talked about before, the three-legged stool of the application, the connectivity, and the cloud, the data. But it's all kind of showing that it's coming together, and they've broken it down into the IoT, which they claim in sort of about 20% of this now is that. Building energy management, prop tech, building to grid, physical security, and building fabric. But I think there's just more and more things now, and there's lots and lots of startups. There's been billions poured into startups in lots of these areas. So it's actually quite an exciting time to think we're beginning to touch all those things now, rather than just the smaller controls part that we did before. Whilst we were integrating with some things, it's becoming more apparent that it's being demanded by more than just our own industry now.
That's encouraging to hear. And Anna, do you want to throw your comment on the Google?
Yeah, this is also from extract from Memory. It's actually last month's, but I kind of, we talked about it in the past, but I brought it forward because of our focus on definition of smart, intelligent, autonomous buildings. And I thought it was an interesting comment from Google. Google's initiatives, they're looking at it and they're making the same realization. What's the definition of smart or intelligent, and how do they look at the world, and all that sort of stuff. So, if you guys haven't seen it, Digital Buildings is an interesting initiative by Google, that they're pushing. Makes for a good read.
So great. Any other sort of comments from anybody else on these news items? There's certainly some trends on what Jim and John was saying about what's happening to real estate. Any other comments and thoughts, news?
I did see something on where, talking about repurposing, where suddenly they've been looking at, malls where they're trying to repurpose those, and realize the cost is phenomenal to actually start trying to change change a mall into a distribution center or a number of other things that they were trying to do, and thinking, hey, maybe this is not going to be financially viable after all.
Was that sort of construction cost or sort of renovation?
This was
sort of thing?
repurposing, so where there is a mall that maybe people are looking to change the use of it, they're suddenly realizing the cost of tearing down what's in there to make it whatever they need to do is a considerable amount of money. It's not just a matter of pulling a few walls down and changing the lighting. It's a significant exercise.
I guess that's not surprising.
No.
Okay. Any other sort of thoughts or news or trends that anybody want to chime in, or we can get on with our topic of the day?
I was going to ask people's views on the thought of people being allowed back in, vaccinated, people who've got vaccinations and stuff. I saw a thing on the NBA Sunday, they were talking about letting spectators in if you've got your vaccination card, you know, whatever that is, being able to go back into the ring. So, you know, once the sports arenas start thinking about how to manage and arrange that, how does that start to affect building owners and buildings?
Well, they're kind of saying they're still not going to allow it to happen because you can still be a carrier.
Right.
And until a vast majority of the nation are actually had the inoculation, you know, you're still spreading it around.
Yeah, I saw a similar report from Singapore, who at the moment, if you fly into there, you have to do a mandatory 2-week. It's actually been reduced to 10 days, but 10-day, isolation. But they're now saying that they're looking at for people who have been vaccinated to be able to nix that. But they made the same assessment, right? They're still trying to work out how much are you potentially able to carry it.
I saw some stories this week where some of the companies are paying their employees to get vaccinated. I don't know if anyone else has seen this yet, but I saw 2 independent stories regarding that topic, 2 different industries altogether. But I'm wondering if that's going to be a trend as well. We talked earlier about, can we disallow employees if they're not vaccinated, or force employees to be vaccinated as a condition of employment. But this was kind of a carrot. This is the carrot side of the carrot and the stick.
It seems to be the case in the healthcare industry. If you are involved in any kind of patient care, it may become mandatory, and any kind of public service where you're dealing with the public. The implications are concerning.
The retail industry is getting big in rewarding their groups to go ahead and get paid to go get your vaccination.
Yeah, Chad's just mentioning that on the chat about Kroger paying their employees.
That was one of them I saw too, was the Kroger story.
Yeah, Dollar General's done it. I think Lidl has done it, and several others. One of them, I think, is about $100 to $150 US has kind of been what I've seen as far as going rates and paid time off. So cash incentive as well as paid time off.
What I'm looking for is a sort of a standard form or a standard declaration or something. I don't believe that exists, of people that can prove that they have been vaccinated, especially crossing borders. Wondering when that's going to come about.
And
I've heard
of airlines and airline-related organizations working on some sort of a passport, which would securely record your status.
Yeah, I saw that in an airline, but I'm just wondering when that sort of gets sort of widespread so that you can actually prove that you've been vaccinated to anybody if you were wanting to go to.
Are we going to be that far down the road where, for example, we have our license, driver's license now, that says that you've gotten, the proof to travel or whatever, which get a little star on your driver's license.
will we have the same thing, utilizing the driver's license as that proof of vaccination?
Something like that.
I have heard rumors for apps, people building apps, linked to your medical records and identifiable, etc. So it'd be app-based, phone-based, app-based
Yeah.
approach.
One of my employees got vaccinated last week and received a vaccination record card with a little CDC stamp up in the corner. Shows the date and the type, which vaccine they got and so forth. So.
But is that just, did that person get both vaccinations, or does he?
They're
or
in
he-
between. They're in between right now.
Gotcha.
So they're scheduled for their second dose already.
Mhm.
So, and that was kind of a go to a site and wait to the end of the day to see if there are any extra unused open doses available. And they were fortunate enough to get one. It was a fairly new site that had just opened here in Phoenix area. And at the end of the day, they had to open a bottle to get to somebody who was scheduled and therefore had 3 or 4 extra doses left over. And so 3 or 4 people got them.
Yeah, same thing's happening here. I mean, they've done about 11 million vaccinations here now, but they're only doing the first one. So there's a high percentage of people who've actually at least had the first one to give a reasonable percentage to help slow it down. But people are hanging around outside vaccination centers at the end of the day in case they got some left.
All right, let's move on. I'm going to bring on Matt Schwartz onto the panel here. Hello, Matt. Good morning or good afternoon to you. Hope you are well.
Just barely afternoon, 18 minutes in. How you guys doing?
I'm Matt.
Good.
Pretty good. So let me shoot you the first question. The sort of the conversation here is that we're trying to sort of figure out smart buildings, that sort of term, and maybe that needs to change to autonomous buildings to give it some new sort of a freshness in branding, as it were. But specifically, the subject we want to talk about is services or being a managed service provider. I'm not quite sure whether you classify yourself as an MSP or not, but could you sort of talk about the services and how you see that being getting more important, or how you're seeing that side of things? And
Sure.
Introduce yourself just for those that don't know you.
Yeah, thanks, Anto. Thanks everybody for inviting me to the Monday Live session today. This is obviously, sorry, let me introduce myself and then dive in. It was such a good question, Anto. I was ready to go. I'm Matt Schwartz. I'm with Altura Associate. I'm an associate principal with the company. I've been working with the crew since we started the company back in 2013, but I've been in buildings as long as legally I could work a paying job. And, I started in design and construction design build management and realized very quickly that some of the buildings I was designing didn't work, and was called the task on that, and developed a real love and a passion for fixing them. And so that got me into commissioning, which in turn got me into energy. And here I am now realizing, building automation, smart buildings are really the heart. Automation itself is really the heart of some of these buildings, or the brain, if you will, that lets us accomplish an autonomous building, a smart building, heck, even a building that just turns on and does what it's supposed to do day to day. And so it has become my mission and that mission of Altura to focus on these buildings as they make up 30+% of the country's energy spend, and make sure that they are running right. And that, of course, pulls us into the smart building space. And we are an owner's consultancy in large part, but to be candid, we are doing more than ever in the last couple of years, going well beyond consultancy into implementation. We're engineers that love to fix things and solve problems. So we like to get our hands dirty, and we got tired of writing reports that just end up on a shelf. And we started figuring out how to write the reports and then go fix things. So that's really what we're invested in right now. And I'll pause there. If there's any other questions or any more of our company's mission or background you'd like me to share, Anto or team?
I think that's good as a background.
Great. So I believe the question was like, how do we see the role of managed services in the autonomous or smart building arena? Is that really the question? Okay. So I guess first I would define both of those things. And I think everybody's definition of what is a managed service and what is an autonomous or a smart building is going to vary, and rightfully so. To us, an autonomous building is really going to come down to a building that accomplishes the owner's goals and does so in a smart and an efficient manner. There are all walks of autonomy. You could argue that autonomy is the building scheduling working and the building turning on without an operator having to do so manually. And autonomy can range the spectrum all the way up to a machine learning algorithm that evaluates the most optimal set point for a system to be operating at. That's all autonomy in my book. So that said, I think the role of managed services would be very hard to put into any one category. And if you look at our market of smart building technologies, that's why we have about 100+ different service offerings that an owner today could go to the market and get a managed service for. Everything from the CBREs of the world that will post up in your building and run the thing and take care of it all, and you just interface with them, to managed services where we are monitoring network health and looking at cybersecurity, or even pulling BAS and analytics completely out of the building and doing so in the cloud, and it's totally hands off for the owner's team. I believe the role of managed services is a very challenging one, because you are destined for failure if you take the position that your role is to sell your service to the building owner. And I think we all need to be very careful as managed service providers, because we develop our products, we put our heart and our soul into these things, and we're certain it can add value to the building, but we need to make sure that lines up with the goals for the building owners, operators, and people within that building. So in my opinion, to try to be a little more concise with my answer, the role of managed services is to figure out if in fact your particular service fits with the needs of a building owner and operator staff, and then to tailor it appropriately so to fit the workflows of the people who are managing that building, no matter what your service is. And that's where we spend a ton of time with building owners, is defining their vision, their goals, what they can take on today, meeting them where they're at, and recognizing what managed services, if any, are going to plug in and do the thing you need it to do here. And so I think as a managed service provider, we should all be challenging ourselves to make sure that we're plugging in, putting square pegs in square holes. And I think that can be extremely challenging. So I'll pause there, because I'd love to hear some feedback and comment on that, and have you guys pull on me, tell me where you want to go in this conversation.
I'll throw out a question. We know each other obviously, but I know your business has some range of customers who don't want a managed service. They want you to install it, implement it, train it, hand it over, whatever. You may have services afterwards, but that's not what we're talking about. And then others who say, please do it for me. All right. Yep. So the question is, are you seeing a trend in change in attitude of what customers are asking for as far as how you deliver your wide range of services to make buildings run better?
That is a great question, John. I'm not, the answer is no, I don't see a trend that favors one model over the other, but I do see correlations. Owners that have technology teams want more to have it in-house. Owners that have strong IT teams want it in-house. Owners that are like property management is a great one. Real estate, leased buildings, very likely don't have those resources. They want managed service. You know, buildings that are not fully staffed or have a full-time operator, we want managed services. Just tell us the thing's working. So I think that's what I see happening, John.
Matt, if I could follow up to John's point, in last week's call, I think it was at our Wednesday call when we prepare for these Monday calls. The observation was that the building owners are cutting staff to support the facilities work that needs to be done. And how are you seeing that? Are you aware of that happening? Because when that happens, it impairs an already environment where the building owners are already struggling to really get what they pay for, because they don't have the time and the resources to optimize the way you guys are able to deliver those kinds of services. So if in fact they're cutting costs in their facilities budgets, then it would argue that managed services, in the sense of an ongoing outsourcing of that type of work, is going to grow in popularity over time. So are you seeing a cutting of staff?
Less a cutting of staff and more a cutting of project budgets, Steve. I'm seeing more freezes and restrictions on capital spending than I am seeing particular, persons left off the team.
Okay.
Hey, Matt.
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
so go ahead, Bill. Go ahead. I'll go after you.
Thank you, Mark. Matt, Bill Bain, Atlanta, Georgia. So I really get the logic and the customer service of what you're saying about letting the building owner sort of feed to you. Hold on. Sort of fitting into what the building owner is looking for. Where do you guys strike a balance on less fitting into what they want or they think they want, and more guiding them on things they don't know that they need?
I think those go in the same sentence, Bill. That's our role in a lot of cases, is showing up day one when there's a visionary within the organization and starting to make real those expectations. I think you have to handle both in the same sentence, meaning I've had clients come to us and say, I want the smartest building in the world. Well, step one is defining what does that mean to you? And let's drill into that. And then as we work through those goal setting sessions, Bill, the meat falls out, right? Like the scope of work starts to fall out of that. And you can marry those big picture aspirations with real technology offerings in the market. And through that, now you can design a system, you can scope managed services if those are in the works. And along the way, you do have to look out for your client and make sure that, like, it's not just, here's a service, do you want it? Okay, add it to the pot. No, that has implications on the bigger picture. So it's a system of systems. Are these all going to play well together? And how do we do that? That's where you got to look out for the pitfalls and make sure that it doesn't just look good on paper, but when we actually build it, it can be built and it will be able to be managed by the owner if they want that, but at a minimum, deliver the value that they're expecting.
Matt, do you have a prescriptive process that you walk every customer through? And is that process the same in each market segment to get to that point you just described?
I will tell you that the magic of the work that I get to do, and I'm really privileged to get to do this, is no, I don't have a process. Leighton, I meet each client where they're at, and much of our work starts with conversation and real expertise sharing of what's going on in the market. And then out of that comes, like, what should we do together? You know, I never show up to the table with the 10-step process for making your smart building or your autonomous managed service selection meeting. We always come to listen first and then build second.
So Matt, Mark, how are you?
Hey, Mark. I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm well, thanks. So question, so when you're having these conversations and you're exploring these opportunities, does CapEx and OpEx enter into the conversation? And if so, how do you guys approach that?
Yes, it does. Almost always, especially when we're talking bigger picture plans for upgrade or building enhancement. And my best advice there is bring everybody to the table. I think we find that a lot of organizations have friction between those departments. There are a lot of times capital departments that don't really talk to facilities, that really don't like to talk to IT. And I think the magic there is getting everybody on the same page. Sometimes that's possible, sometimes that's not possible. But we really need to do that because I think there's deep value in recognizing where we can leverage CapEx projects to accomplish facilities goals. And there's places where we can look at facilities OpEx projects and tie those lessons learned back into the CapEx department. And so these things are all related. And if you strive to find the synergies between them, you can deliver projects at lower cost of equal value. And so it's you got to take a big picture approach to that and bring all those buckets of money into the fold, Mark.
Do folks that you've been talking to, do they ask you, well, this is going to be as a service or a managed service? Most definitely, it's CapEx versus OpEx. Are they proactive enough to possibly see that in advance or no?
Oh yeah, they see it in advance. That's almost the first question. If I'm hearing you right, Mark, one of the first questions that comes up in a meeting about a managed service is, what is the ongoing cost associated with this service and what do I get out of it? And so absolutely that comes up and it does need addressed in nearly every meeting about managed services.
Is there a conversation typically about the fact that CapEx and OpEx needs to come out of different budgets?
I think inherently they just always do in most cases. Right. And then the meat of the conversation is about the overlap between the two. And it's more to the tune of like, well, that should be CapEx, shouldn't it? How do we get those guys to pay for it? And so the real challenge is breaking down the barriers that allows the money to flow bidirectionally so that we can do more with our project scopes.
Hey, Matt. Sorry, go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, sure, thanks. Who do you actually call the customer? I mean, is it the owner? Because owners and occupiers these days are very different people. Mostly people are leasing buildings as opposed to owning them. And obviously the people who are occupying have got a shorter view than the people who actually own the buildings, the real estate guys and things. So, I mean, who do you see as those? Because there's fewer real estate companies, so it means less customers go around in theory. But whereas it used to be the owner occupier was a bigger market.
Yeah. For the most part, our customers are the building owner operator, exception being when, a building management company is used to operate the building and handle all projects relative to automation and energy, etc. I will share a neat fact that, interestingly enough, we are starting to work with more contractors who value our approach with, and I'm sorry, I don't want to turn this into a plug, but I do want to share that like analytics is a core value or a core service offering of Altura. And we use it to hold projects to task. We drive deep accountability with it on the construction side of things. So more and more, Roger, some of our clients are construction managers and general contractors that are saying, please come get on my project and demystify what the BAS team is telling me, what folks are saying. They're done and they've left and the building's not working. Tell me why. And we can go shine a light on why that is and hold folks to task with that. So I would say owners and then really any entity who's responsible for the operation of the building tends to be a customer of ours as well.
Okay, because we're seeing the same thing here with the MSI role, where they're beginning almost to be consultants for the contractors and the consultants themselves who perhaps don't understand quite what's going on yet.
Yeah,
they
we've
have
gone
to
the other way,
factor
right?
in.
Like we used to be the consultants that are now being asked to do the MSI work,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
so it's really neat to see some of this overlap that's happening in the market, because as engineers, you know, it's an unspoken thing in the consultant industry that like you write the report, you find the issues, you do the analysis, but you darn well don't go in and move set points around and touch the BAS, right? That's changing. And it's great because we're putting engineers in the driver's seat of these systems and driving deep value by doing so.
So Matt, when to sort of build on Roger's point, on the other side of the equation, who do you run into internally who are the resistors or the gatekeepers to your process when you go into the customer?
That is a good question. Wow, I guess in pure candor, the biggest resistor to our process is usually proprietary system vendors that sort of have the building on lock and key, have had existing relationships for years and years and years and years, but frankly, the market is somewhat innovated past what they're delivering, and the owner is very interested in innovating as well. And we get a lot of initial resistance up front from the folks who, you know, are used to operating things their way. Now, that's external. Internally, it is not uncommon to find some resistance from, you know, facilities folks who are very intimately connected with the operation of these buildings. And here comes a consultant saying, I want to change the way you do things. So I think that's a natural resistance that we face. And I bet a lot of folks on this call have faced that as well. And to be candid, we need to remember that these people's jobs and livelihoods depend on their ability to operate these buildings. And it's normal for them to put up some resistance there. And we take an approach of building rapport with those individuals and letting them know, like, here's why we're here. It's not to make you look bad. It's to help you do better and take you to the next level, because this is where the market's going, where your organization's going. And if you don't put in the time to do that up front, you're setting yourself up for a lot of overrides and disaster at the end of whatever project you're doing or implementing.
So
And
Matt,
sorry.
you didn't mention IT.
Careful, don't get me going on IT, Anto.
Well, my question was very specific, but you can then broaden that. That the way a lot of IT services are delivered are through services, through MSPs, right? So that's kind of the norm now there. It wasn't 10 years ago. And I'm wondering if you're seeing that as being something that sort of owners are recognizing as being a trend, and then you can talk about IT.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, absolutely. So there's kind of two things that pop into my brain when you ask me that question. One is the need to get data out of the buildings, which facilitates a need for IT. Two is an enhanced look at cybersecurity. That is totally, it's related, but doesn't source from building automation. It sources from the fact that we live in a world where people are constantly trying to attack our data systems. And so when you put those two together, there is every one of our owners is asking us, am I secure? What do I do with IT? Where, you know, how do I protect myself and these systems that we're constantly working on upgrading and maintaining? I think it's great that there are now managed services, especially for the types of companies that we mentioned earlier that don't have IT resources, that give us the ability to secure up these buildings while still getting data out and unlocking them. You know, I think that's neat. And I also think it's neat to see some of these companies that establish data connections as their service, taking that security to the next level as well. I've seen a lot of improvement in the VPN tunnel world, for example. But I also think we have a responsibility for the companies that do have strong IT resources to make sure that they're armed with knowledge and understand that there's a vast amount of this work that they can deliver in-house with a little bit of BAS education of their IT groups. Now, what I mean by that, to make an example of it, is there's two trains of thought when we put a BAS in a building. You could put it on its own network, or you could put it on your IT network. Typically, when I say the latter, the first thing that happens is people go, that's not secure. You got to keep it separate. from the corporate IT network? Well, the reality is, if you talk to a savvy IT person, you can do both. And so we do work with a lot of owners that have strong IT departments to help them recognize that they can use their existing infrastructure and still virtually or physically isolate these networks and these systems and spend a lot less cost than to just kind of go the old school route and stick BAS on its own network. And that's getting pushed forward even more by the disappearance of legacy networks like MSTP and LAN, and we're moving to IP-centric controllers. So now it's an IP device. It's definitely popping up on the radar of our IT groups. And again, this is for companies who have a big central IT and do their own infrastructure. But these things are popping up on their radar and they're saying, what do I do with this device? I want to scan it. I want to make sure it's up to the snuff with all my other standards. And I want to be able to monitor it for intrusion or traffic anomalies. So I think we have a huge role to play in the IT sector. And that comes down to helping clients know, do I need a managed service for my IT, or do I do this in-house, or is there like a blend of both of those things that they need to do? And we consult on that actually quite heavily. That was a long-winded answer to your question, Anto. Did I actually answer it?
Yes.
I think, Matt, I think you nailed that. I personally think you nailed that. I also think that even with IT teams, they're so overburdened these days doing other things that we see it in multiple verticals, not the least of which is the vertical we're talking about today, where they'd be happy to somehow get this off their hands as long as you can maintain security and so forth. So even when they have large IT teams, ExxonMobil, you name it, these IT guys and gals are running at full speed, and the bandwidth's just not where we think it might be.
I think, and I think, like, to play devil's advocate on that idea a little bit, Bill, there are also IT teams out there that when you sit down and speak the right vernacular and show them, like, here's what a VAV IP controller does, looks like, talks, and its responsibility, that say like, oh, that's no big deal. Yeah, put that on the network. We're going to put it on a dedicated VLAN. And let's do this for all of our projects moving forward. Why are we putting extra switches and cabling in the building? We could just plug this into TER room 5, guys. And so, like, again, this comes down to meeting your clients where they're at. And I think for a client who has the ability to take that in-house, we're doing all of ourselves a service by empowering them and educating them on how to do so. And then going and helping the clients who don't know how to do that with a managed service that can still get them unlock the value of having those connections and security, and without forcing them to staff up internally. It's not a one size fits all answer.
I got that. I'll mildly agree with your devil's advocacy, mildly.
So throw it out to the rest of the panel here.
Matt, just on as you do your analysis with the customers and looking at the managed services, are there any gaps in the technology software world that are missing? You know, we've got all sorts of solutions like alarms and work orders and fault detections. Is there anything else that's missing in that world?
Ooh, let me just tell you where my head goes, and you can tell me if I really answer your question well or not. The thing that's missing, in my opinion, is getting what we have to work well before we take things to the next level. I see a lot of managed services that are focused on the next level, which is great. We're going to need that. But if you plug in next level technology to a base building that doesn't have, the most basic autonomy working, what are you going to do when you start sending commands down to that building? And lo and behold, it doesn't turn off when you send it the turn off command. So I think the gap is really, have we brought the majority of buildings that we want to deploy new and innovative managed services on, specific to new and innovative managed services? Have we brought those buildings up to a good baseline before we're ready to take them to next level innovation? If not, we're setting ourselves up for failure when we deploy and we only get a marginal amount of the value we said we were going to deliver with our managed service.
Yep.
Would you put things like AI and machine learning in that category of things that we should sort of get right?
I would. Yeah, those are two very good examples. You know, you can have the best AI in the world, but if when you send a command into the BAS, that command doesn't do anything on the other side, you're dead in the water.
Right.
So Matt, getting to that baseline, how our industry doesn't, maybe David Katz is referring to something that he's doing that might be applicable here, but is this baseline standard of excellence, if you will, how can a building owner know where he is relative to that baseline?
That is where our analytic, and if you're asking me, that's
Yeah.
where we've been successful. To tie this to a real world example, we've been successful using analytics to paint that visibility, Steve.
Yeah.
Step one for us when we get acquainted with a building is to hook it up to the health monitor. You know, get some data coming out of that building. I want to run analytics against that and see how broken we really are. And as an engineer, I just want to look at the trend data coming out of that building, and analytics empowers that as well. BAS does to a certain degree also, but the analytics lets you apply that next level of like, okay, I'm suspect of a couple issues here. I'm gonna look across all 20 of your buildings for that issue now. And then now I can quantify a real project here that has real savings and have a much bigger impact than to just focus on that one air handler. I'm going to look at 20. So first I get my heartbeat monitor hooked up to it and figure out how well the building's doing. And then I want to retro commission that building. And retro commissioning can go far beyond the traditional scope of just, you know, reporting on what opportunities exist to do better. We embed MSI work into some of our retro commissioning projects and go in and fix it. Or maybe we need to scope a BAS upgrade for the building if we're really going to take it to next level, because we've got a 30-year-old system in that building and nobody's left that knows how to program that system. So rip it out, put in a new one. And while we're putting in that new one, let's get to that baseline and then validate it with the data. Once we're validated with the data and we've checked out that everything works, then yeah, we can plug in whatever third-party service we want to move that building needle even further down. That would be my recommendation there, Steve, is analytics and commissioning get us there.
So Matt, Mark again. So question for you. So do you feel in the business model that you guys have, obviously it sounds like it's fairly well perfected here, is there a minimum type building or group of buildings, and then obviously you can go from small, medium, large, extra large, and then super wide? Where would be your minimum that you think the model would actually work, and where it may not work because it's a managed service or whatever?
I would say really, like, just to tie it to the kind of buildings we work on might be the best way to answer your question, Mark. We work on, you know, as small as a 20,000 foot office building up to, well, the sky's the limit in terms of size. Once you go up from there, you can go as big as you want and get value out of the process. For smaller buildings, you know, tilt ups, packaged units, things that traditionally don't have a centralized BAS and are much harder to get data out of, you take a totally different approach to those buildings, or you gang, you know, 20 of those together and get deep value out of them that way. There's no building that doesn't fit the opportunity for retro commissioning. They all use energy. It just depends what process and how much labor you are going to put on that project. And a responsible provider of commissioning service is going to adjust that scope appropriately for the building, right? If you're scoping a $50,000 retro commissioning project on a 5,000 square foot building, you're never going to see those dollars come back to you. So you need to be responsible upfront when you scope these projects and meet your buildings and your owners where they're at.
Cool.
So Rick LeBlanc has posted a question acknowledging the trend of MSIs, and he's asking if you're seeing any trends of what he's referring to as master service administration, which is somebody, single provider that helps building owner manage all service work, code compliance, etc. in the building.
My face is probably giving away that that's the first time I've heard that acronym.
Yeah.
So no, I haven't seen that yet. And to be honest, I haven't seen a building yet with so many services that you would want to have someone in that role. But again, that's just me and the buildings that I touch. But no, that's a new one for me. Are you guys seeing that? Is that quickly becoming a trend or a thing?
It's the first time I've seen it. I don't know if anybody else has seen it.
How do you differentiate that from services that JLL and CBRE are providing? If you're going to ask Rick that or bring him in, Anto?
I guess I will bring him in. Rick, you are on your way in. There you go.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, Rick.
Hey, Rick.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, here's the notion. You're exactly right, Jim. It's similar to what some of the property managers like JLL do for their own buildings. But other building owners who have multiple buildings maybe don't have that. And the challenge they have is all kind of different vendors install different equipment, whether it's fire alarm, elevators, boilers, whatever. And they come and go and they do their service, and they come and go and they make sure that the systems are tested and inspected for code compliance. But there's often not a central depository for that information. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you have an anchor tenant on the 5th floor, and the tenant says, am I code compliant? And is all service work up to date on this space? And if you don't have something like what JLL and CBRE has, you got to go look through the records for
Rick, we are okay. So that to me is a real problem that we do see with our clients in terms of just not having visibility to the more asset management. I would call that like asset management oriented side of running a building. And you know, I think, tell me if I'm getting off base, but where we do find ourselves and our clients asking for help in that space is like just knowing. They just want to know, like to your exact point, has my quarterly maintenance been performed? Do I have open tickets on this equipment that's reoccurring that should make me reconsider, you know, maintaining this versus replacing it? And I think there is a role, Rick, tying it back to your original question about having a role for that type of responsibility. I see that tied closer to the role of a systems architect or like a technology or organizational kind of data flow consultant where, and we play this role where it's, you know, for an owner, sometimes you need to go out and assess and collect what are all those connected systems? What are all the data sources that all this is available from? And how are we going to workflow that into our personnel so that we know answers to those questions? I think if anything, the pandemic has pointed out to us too, that we don't have visibility to a lot of our buildings. You know, you'd have to ask your clients like today for all of your buildings, do you know if you're ventilating per code? Probably not, because most of these systems don't have flow monitoring. They don't have flow control. Some of them are just fixed and set at tab, and they're variable systems that we know dip down below those settings or get adjusted over time by operators manually. And that's where we're hurting right now. So there's absolutely a role, Rick, for somebody who can work with an owner and paint a picture of beyond just the BAS, beyond just any one service, but how the whole ecosystem of these services play together and bring data asset management into that, bring work order management into that, bring code compliance into that, and help vision set with an owner on like, what are we going to do with all this data? Does that answer your question?
Thanks, Matt. That's a good response. I'm coming at this not from a BAS background, although that's my career as a BAS guy. I come at it from a point of view, it's just like Jim said, it's JLL has this capability, CBRE has this capabilities for the buildings they manage. And some kind of a dashboard, for want of a better word, where everything you want to know about your building is there. If you want to look at the 4th floor, room 212, what are all of the systems telling you about that space? Well, first of all, you never have all the tags right? It's a haystack problem. You never have all the tags the same for all of the different systems. So you got to look through 17 different systems to figure things out. And I think there's an opportunity for, I call it a master service integrator, if you like, to help manage that and give that information to the property owner. Otherwise, how do you know if you're code compliant? Well, how you know is you go into the file for Otis Elevator, you see if it's been tested. You go into the Simplex file and see if it's tested and inspected on the fire alarm. It's just archaic what you have to do to find out if your building's code compliant. And this comes up, people are coming back to the building and the tenants are saying, oh, is the building code compliant? Not an easy thing to answer unless you orchestrate that data.
No, and I think you absolutely have to be careful too, to not hit the pitfall of like, hey, we need to connect all these systems to one thing. Because the reality is that can also be a recipe for failure. So where we find ourselves, Rick, like trying to solve that problem you described with our owners is understanding how their organizations work so that we flow the right data to the right people who need to have answers to their questions. Now, sometimes that means I should be able to get my elevator code certificate out of the BAS front end. A lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times it means that the facilities group that manages that has that stored somewhere else. But the magic is making sure that everyone has what they need and there's a pipeline for that data to get updated and get there. Sometimes that's centralized, sometimes that's not. I want to be cognizant of time too. I know it's 12:58. Anto, John, do you guys want to?
Just one final point, if I might. We've gotten to that point with some of our pharmaceutical and life science customers, but only tying 2, at most 3 silos together. So correlating industrial and process data with HVAC data for validated spaces, but we haven't found anybody else willing to pay for that level of integration yet, Rick, in our suite. Sorry.
So it occurred to me that there's actually 2 parts of that problem that you raised, Rick. One is the technology side of it in terms of the mechanism to do that, and the second part is the role of somebody to do that. I don't think either of those exist right now. That's kind of my take of it. So we're coming up to the top of the hour. Matt, do you want to close this out? Give you the last words?
Sure. Oh, I love taking the last word. Thank you, Anto. Knowing that a lot of us on this call are providers of these services, I'm going to take an owner's role here and ask that everybody kind of think about some of the things that I said today and keep looking to meet your owners where they're at. Your owners want efficiency, they want cost savings, but they want the value. And I think as an industry, we're selling products, we're selling services. We tend to sometimes put ourselves first. You will always be more successful if you put the owner's needs first and focus on those opportunities to collaborate with your peers in this space, look for synergies amongst these services, and be flexible and open to change. We're in a very dynamic, changing market right now. So be ready to pivot at a moment's notice if need. But those are the parting words I'll leave you at, with a thank you as well for inviting me today, guys. I really enjoyed the time.
No,
Thanks a lot, Matt. I was wanting to end that because that's our theme, is be the change, and that's exactly the message.
Words of wisdom.
Right.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you, Rick, for contributing as well. And with that, we'll make it a wrap. And video of this will be out tomorrow morning, and we'll continue this discussion next week on Monday Live next Monday. So thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.